All right, guys, we are back. We're at the AudioControl booth. They've got a slew of new products here. Preamplifiers, power amplifiers, receivers, Atmos, you name it. We've got Chris Kane here. I'm going to turn this over to Chris. I want you to give us kind of an overview of all your products, because there's too many models here for me to remember at my age. And you're so young and you're so smart and you know all this stuff.
That's right.
So here we go. You tell us give us a rundown of all this stuff.
Great. Thanks, Gene. Yeah, we're very excited. I mean, we have 10 new products this year, which is for a company like ours is a major undertaking on home theater, both processors, receivers, and amplifiers. The first model right here, this is something we are super proud of. This is the new Maestro X9 theater processor. Now this is a full immersive processor, so it supports up to 16 channels, so 9.1.6. 4 of the channels are actually totally mappable, so I can have discrete sub-outs if I want to, or additional heights or width.
So if you do that with 4 subs, would you have independent delay and level for all 4 subs?
All 4 subs, correct. Nice. Yeah, so it's a big thing from the dealers as they're getting into bigger jobs where they want maybe smaller subs, but more of them inside the room to give much more balanced bass response as opposed to...
We always promote multiple subs on all of our setups. That's the way to go.
Absolutely, absolutely. It gives you much balance from that too. And then the other thing that's a big thing on this platform is we have Ethernet, not only for control, but for the GUI and the menu and the setup. I mean, a product like this these days, between source setup and zone setup and channel assignments and all that, it just outgrows what's available on the OSD. So we had to get a way to give that to the programmers. So through the network port here, you'll be able to do that without having, these could be in a separate room in a rack or somewhere else. So
let me ask you something. You said it's 16 channel processor. You've recently added Auro 3D to the mix?
We have.
Okay.
Voice of God.
So how do we get a unified channel layout that supports all 3 formats on this product? What do you recommend a kind of speaker layout to do that?
Well, I guess it depends on the size of the room, and that's going to affect how many of the height channels you're actually going to implement with that. I mean, let's face it, there's so many different surround modes and format modes and surround. I think if you focus at bare bones at, 4 of the height modes, plus the voice of God, and then what you are with the surround, and depending on the size of the room, you can then scale it. I mean, and one of the things about the rear channels too is, even if you don't have the discrete channels, you can always use multiple amplifiers to kind of create fill situations also.
Oh, nice. And you could actually, if you have a large room and you want to have multiple side channels, you could direct those channels to the side channels.
You can feed them to an amplifier, and just some of our amps have dual inputs, or you can split the signals off to them. So big growth opportunity from that.
So what's the difference between this guy and this guy?
Well, the Maestro X9, I mean, we designed this to kind of to start life as just a high-end 2-channel preamplifier that also happens to do theater surround. So from the get-go, this has got the new ESS Sabre 9038 DACs, that's like the top of the line, the biggest, the baddest, the whole bit. So there's 140 dB signal to noise range in those, which is monster. I mean, our previous pre-pros, I think, are around 120, which is nothing to slouch at. But the new DACs,
the noise floor of my test
oh my God! I think our engineer said it was 0.0004%, which I was almost embarrassed to talk about. It's like nothing. But the DAC is, I think, 4 or 5 times much more cost than our traditional DAC. So you've got a high-end 2-channel preamplifier that then supports all the surround formats we were talking about.
So those DACs are on just the front channels or on all the channels?
They're on all the channels.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay, so now what about this model?
The X7, this is no slouch by any sense, but this is same feature set as what we do with the X9. But we're using the standard DACs that we use within some of the other products within the platform. Has all the balanced inputs, the discrete channels, the Auro 3D, and by the way, these all support the new eARC format too. So I think as 8K starts to rear its head and content comes out and everybody figures out what the best transport mechanism for 8K, I think eARC may be something that's getting lots more use out of it.
So how many channels did we get on this model then?
This is a 16 channel also, yeah. And by the way, both of these units utilize the Dirac Live bass management software. So you can bring, and if you've ever used Dirac before, I mean, it's great where you can take the microphone and plug it into a computer as opposed to running it back to the rack. Dirac allows you to capture all the channels, send that off the Dirac server. It creates the inverse curve, dumps it back down inside the processor, and then the end user has the ability to then go in and fine-tune and create maybe a more refined target curve or a different target curve if they want to kind of bring it to reality.
So you said something very important I want to basically stress to you guys. Unlike the older generation products and many products that do room correction, you have to plug the microphone into the front of the unit. That's great if the unit is actually in the theater room and it's close enough to the seats so the cable's long enough to reach to the seats, right? Well, in this case, this has a PC interface. You can plug the microphone into the PC, so this unit doesn't have to be in the same room. It could be in a rack somewhere in another room or in a closet. You could do room correction from anywhere, and it's a much more convenient way of doing it.
And you also have the capabilities to do it wirelessly too, so if you've got this on the network, but your case in point, because we would have dealers that would buy a unit of a previous generation and say, by the way, how much is the microphone extension? And we'd go, why do you need that? And I said, well, the receiver is 3 rooms away, so this makes it a lot easier. And dealers really like the benefits you get from calibration, but running back and forth to the rack makes it kind of difficult to do that. So
gotcha. So what are the prices? We didn't talk about the prices on this unit and this unit.
Yeah, the X9 has a client selling price of $9,600. The X7 has a selling price of $6,600. Both of them should be in production towards the end of this year, so just in time for Christmas, we hope.
Nice.
So we're very excited about that. And then that kind of led, obviously, to what we're doing with amplifiers these days too. If you want to chat about that, or
before you talk about
sure.
Before we go into the amplifiers, this has the newest version of D-Rack Live that supposedly does multiple subwoofers. They had a press release that talks about how you could place the subs virtually anywhere in the room, and it'll find the best calibration settings for those subs, allowing the end user more placement flexibility for multi-sub. So these are going to ship with that when you start shipping these units, correct? And it's going to be functioning. Let's make that clear. D-Rack is going to be working on these units from the first day that it ships. I'm asking you to commit to that.
Well, I will commit as my engineers commit to me, but officially it's D-Rack Live with base management. So that is the plan. I mean, and we will have, by the way, also an app available for this. You can, and the D-Rack Live, just for those that have used it before, you can download the interface off of our website, and then at least do a little bit of a test drive and take a look at it, but without connected to a processor. But it's a very, very powerful room correction. But yeah, we're definitely intending to ship it full tilt.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a really technical question for us bass heads. Until you get into the really high-end processors like this, bass management has some inflexibilities if you want to route LFE to anything other than the subwoofer channels. Can I route LFE to the main channels if I have really large speakers and still have a subwoofer channel on this unit? Do you know if that's a possibility?
I know we talked about that in the initial software, so I'd have to go back and see what the final development is.
We're going to follow up on that because that's kind of an issue that I like to always have the ability to do for bigger upscale systems. So I'm curious when you get a chance to look at that. Mm-hmm. So why don't we do a rundown of these amplifiers? Tell us the topology, the power, the models, all that stuff.
Absolutely. So, I mean, AudioControl's been a manufacturer of theater amps for about 15 years now. And our new family these days, you'll notice there's exciting cosmetics here with the front panels, with the blue light across the front. We build and design all these at our factory in Seattle. I mean, we truly have guys building amp cards and designing circuit boards. These are predominantly based on a Class H topology. So, and the Class H is basically a Class AB amplifier, but with a couple extra rails and the power supply. So, a traditional Class AB amp or Class A amplifier tends to run kind of like driving your car with your foot on the gas pedal all the time. And you're feathering the clutch to control output levels. Class H is more like having a transmission in there, so it's only drawing power as needed in the application, so you tend to run a lot cooler, not draw as much energy, you can get away with a little bit less space, and it allows us to be able to put as much power in the box as possible.
And you don't have to use quite as large of a heatsink because you're dissipating less power over idling.
Absolutely. Although sometimes I get people who say, oh, I'd love to have them bigger. And I'm like, well, we don't necessarily need them that much bigger, but it gives them some flexibility to the design.
So I see some of these channels, it looks like they're bridgeable. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that. What kind of power do you get when it's bridgeable, and is it stable down to 4 ohm loads?
Sure. We started with the introduction of the Avalon G4 here, and this is a 4-channel amplifier, but not to just sit back and say it's 4 channels and be done. We said, well, what can we do for the multi-channel? So you can actually run 4 channels for like high channels and get 230 watts into 8 ohms out of those, or I can bridge it and adjacent channels and get 2 channels and get up to about 600 watts out of this into 8 ohms. So the other application is kind of in between, is the 3-channel mode, where I have 2 channels on a satellite, and then I just bridge these 2 channels to run to a subwoofer. And that's why you see on there, Gene, is the crossover switches and the level settings, where I can literally do some signal routing and branch it from there. So this is kind of becoming a real popular topology. So when we visited the Savoy and the Pantages chassis, and by the way, these are all named after movie theaters. People always wonder, where'd you come up with those names, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had a book of old movie theaters. Sadly, a lot of them probably aren't around anymore, but that's where the amplifier names came out of. But one nice thing about these is these also are 230 watts. They're stable down to 4 ohms. But in the multi-channel, the 5 and the 7, we designed them so that adjacent channels here can be bridged also. So if you've got a system where maybe got 2 tower speakers that are part of a big theater, but I'm going to do a lot of 2-channel listening, I can bridge these for higher power levels like that. And then you got the cool blue LEDs, of course, in there.
So one thing I'm noticing just looking at these products, and I'm kind of looking down, and I love the white silk screens on the back. It makes it so much easier to read. I'm seeing some companies starting to do that now, and it's an awesome change to be doing that. All these products have that. The other thing I like is you have a ground float or isolation switch here, which is great if you have a ground loop in your system, and it's much easier to troubleshoot. If you want to lift the ground, you just do it with a switch back here. That's just another example when you're dealing with like a custom integrated company like AudioControl, these little details that you put in your products that you don't always get in normal consumer products.
No, we hear from a lot of our dealers, or you go to a job and help them put something inside of a rack, and things becoming real obvious about gaps here and how rack gears mount. And you hit on a great point there, is we started with some of our processes a few years back of let's do the outputs in black and do the inputs in white, and that started with our receiver products. And then that contrast kind of carried over where dealers said, hey, I really like that because I'm peeking around behind this with a pen light trying to plug things in, and built it from there. And the ground isolation switch and extra little triggers and stuff, those are all feedback we get from dealers about, you know, the kind of things that they're going to run into. They want to try and solve it while they're on the site.
So what's the prices of these amplifiers?
The Savoy G3 is $3,600. The Pantages is $2,800. The Avalon is $2,200. And then we didn't talk too much, but these are 2 new subwoofer amplifiers. This is the RS1000 and this is the RS500. And the legacy of that, by the way, is we made a product years ago. You might remember the Richter scale EQ crossover. So we took that Richter scale legacy because it was a subwoofer crossover, and we used that to name the product. So, and these sell, the 1U sells for $1,400, and the 2U is $1,800.
You can tell this guy really knows his stuff. He knows all the prices of all the products.
Yeah.
How many times have we been to booths at CEDIA where we ask the prices of stuff, and you get a blank look on the person's face that you're interviewing? I'm very impressed with that.
Thank you. Well, fortunately, I spent last week helping the guys finish up the price list, so I had a chance to look at that. But
so let's go take a look at your receivers.
Sure. Great.
Okay, guys, so we're back here. For those that don't have the rack space for separates, AudioControl has you covered with 3 new receivers. So Chris, I'm going to give you the mic again. You're going to give us a rundown of these products. Tell us about the channel configurations, the power, the common features, all that stuff. Take it over.
Awesome. Thanks, Gene. Yeah, we have done a nice, our engineering team has done a really nice job of bringing together some really powerful amplification with a lot of features that I think are fitting into a lot of today's applications. So we have 2 new receivers in our XR generation here that are actually 16-channel receivers. Now, there's 7 amplified channels, but then additionally there are preamp outputs for the Dolby Atmos or height channels and subwoofers. And much like our preamplifiers, those 4 channels are mappable, so you can direct what you like to do. So it gives the end user a lot of flexibility. We have Wi-Fi as well as Bluetooth capability, so we can actually work with a lot of the streaming services and be an audio endpoint, I guess you could say, including some of the room products that are coming out there. The XR8 here, this is the big boy. This is a Class H high current amplifier. It puts out 120 watts per channel into 8 ohms, 200 watts into 4 ohms. I would argue this is probably the most powerful receiver that's out there.
How many channels driven is that power rated?
That's all channels driven.
So it's not the one channel, 10%, 1 kilohertz, 6 ohm rating on Tuesday that you see for some of the other competitors.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can arguably say we probably coined the term all channels driven years ago with our amplifiers, and I started seeing it pop up in people's manuals over time, as opposed to some of the other terminology. There's marketing watts and there's engineering watts, so we try and focus on the engineering watts, and with that we end up finding ourselves driving a lot of the more accurate and sometimes less efficient speakers. And you're right, it's for that customer says, God, I really want the performance as separate, but maybe I don't have the space for it. So the XR8's a great option for that.
So there's one feature on these receivers and on the pre-pros we didn't talk about. You guys actually have IMAX enhanced.
Oh, we do, yes. I mean, we are supportive of a lot of the formats, beginning with when Dolby Vision came out last year, and then we were one of the first IMAX enhanced partners coming on at the beginning of the year, and actually there's going to be an IMAX enhanced pavilion at CES this year, so we'll be part of that. And I think as we see that content start to grow, or as IMAX spends the time to go back and remaster the content, both video as well as the DTSX audio channels on it, I think we'll see more of that. It's a very strong brand in terms of the consumer awareness side.
So the XR8 has 7 internal amplifiers, and then you have how many channels of processing you have?
We have a total of 16 channels of processing, yeah. And that doesn't include, we also have second zone output capability, so we could take
You could do 16 channels in the main room and then have zone 2 capability.
Zone 2 capability. Or if you're not going to be using all the height channels, you can repurpose a couple of these amplified channels to maybe run a second zone if you wish to. So a lot of flexibility there.
Awesome. So what's the next model? What do we step down to?
Right down here we go to the XR6. Now the XR6 is the same platform of what we're doing with the XR8. But unlike the high current Class H amplifier, this is a traditional Class AB topology, so it produces 100 watts per channel, all channels driven. It plays into lower impedances, but the power level doesn't go up like the XR8 does. So definitely an amazing sounding unit. This is a $6,600 selling price on the XR8. This is a $5,600 selling price on the XR6, or excuse me, $4,600, excuse me. And then from there we go down to the get that out of the way, XR4. Now the XR4 is a 12-channel processor with 7 amplified. This is a $3,600, so this is kind of a new category for where we're at. A lot of times our processors and receivers are matched up in systems where there's higher performance speakers involved, which is where the fit is. Because if you're using a $8,000 to $10,000 to $12,000 speaker system, you probably don't want to put a $700 receiver on there. You would like something of quality to go with that. And I think that's what we see from a lot of our customers of, hey, you know what, I'm going to buy a nice car, I'm going to spend some good money on the tires. So we want to make sure they get that level of performance, whether they begin with a 16-channel fully immersive system all the way down to if you call it going down to 12 channels.
On this model with the 12 channels, are the channels assignable? So if I want to add additional subwoofers, like your other models, can you do that on this one as well?
Not on this one. This one you have the Atmos channels that are defined from there, and I believe it's a single subwoofer output on there. But as you know, software continues to develop, so if something changes, you'll be the first to know.
So do all of these models also come with DRAC Live like the other separate units do as well?
Yeah, they come with the DRAC. They're going to ship with the DRAC Live base management. They have a remote, and by the way, a new thing also is we'll have app capability, which we didn't have in the past, in addition to the network port connections that are on there. And this is probably where the eARC tends to be a little bit more beneficial too, because I think as we see, well, let's say, because we're seeing some 4K content coming out, and I think people are running into challenges of how to distribute it from point A to point B if I don't have fiber or anything of that. eARC allows that content to come from the TV into the processor and the video remain there. I think with 8K, that kind of technology is probably going to be even that much more important until they come out with a 8K fiber piece for $10,000 or whatever the solution is.
Well, guys, this looks awesome. So we get basically 3 new receivers, 2 new processors, a slew of amplifiers, pretty much you guys have everything covered for whatever someone has, from a basic 7-channel home theater all the way to 16 channels, and maybe even beyond, because you can do multi-zone as well. So very impressed with these products. We're going to definitely take a look at one of these in the coming months. Chris, I appreciate you taking the time going over all these products with us, remembering all the facts, remembering the prices. It's not always an easy thing to do. So guys, if you like this video, please thumb it up, subscribe. Check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Audioholics. We'll give you some unique content there. It goes there first before it goes on our YouTube. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.